Next attack is broken authentication and session management. What happens when a user passes credentials to us, they give us, to get the sensitive information, a username and password. Now, since we're in this HTTP world at this moment in time, there is no session really. Session establishment is not part of the HTTP protocol itself. It's part of the programming beyond that. So we, in wanting to satisfy the end user's needs for establishing a connection to our resources back here, we say, okay, it's connectionless. How do we maintain state of information that the user is sending us in a way that we can track here so that we can say, oh, they've been browsing these fields, they've been looking at these things, and we're going to keep on going. It's, for instance, it's the shopping cart that I have here that's got 2 or 3 items and the little link that says continue shopping. Well, how I set that up is I create a session with you. I create this replacement for your username and password that establishes the session with me. That's a session ID that I hand you. You, on your side, hold that session ID, that cookie, and keep on passing it back and forth. So what happens here is that you are attacked by somebody out there and they capture your session information and use it against us. Maybe their credit card information is stored back here for you as a convenience for you, and they purchase products and have them sent to somewhere else. They resell them on Craigslist, and then they capture the money and they bring it back to themselves. And I lost the product, and you footed the bill for it. What is it going to look like on my side as a forensics investigator when there's broken authentication and bad session management? Well, let's just take a quick look at the whole illustration of it. The user sent their credentials, so you sent me your credentials. I sent you back a rewritten URL string with a session ID in it, and that session ID was not sufficiently strong or unique or robust or long or random enough. And then you go to another site like hacker.com, so not me, but over there, and hacker.com says, hey, send me your session ID. They take that session ID and then they use it and they come back to me. What would that look like to me? Well, here we finally have something that is an artifact on the web server in my mind. We saw you at your IP address with this session coming to me, successful exchange back and forth. So we'd get a successful 200. So that means that you got some data from my server. In my web log, it would say 200. I might even say 100, continuation. Your IP address, your session, successful connection. Next step happens out there. His IP address, previous connection. I would see here 2 different IP addresses established under the same session. That may be my artifact. That would either be in the web log. Those sessions would be pretty close to each other and the success of those sessions, or it would be in my backend database saying this session ID was established with one and then matched up with another. So here we'd find a little evidence. So far we haven't found any. The way to protect against this is to make our SSL certificate robust enough so that we have encryption between the two of us, and if the session was tried to be reestablished through another SSL communication over here, I would say, wait a minute, that's coming from the wrong place, and I would drop the session at that point. Or what I would do is I would increase the randomness of the IDs that I was handing out in this authentication mechanism. Now, that's a fix for it. That's not forensics data. You'd have to be looking at the log on the web server, and you'd have to be looking at the internal session ID generation process on the web server if any of that data was maintained on the server. It's unlikely that that would be maintained but the two log entries would be there. They would be really close together at that point. Insecure direct object reference. So on my web server, I have sensitive documents sitting back there. And you are allowed to get to them because you've authenticated. You save that direct link to that sensitive document on your machine. And instead of going through the authentication mechanism again and saying, hey, I'd like to get to that document again, you click that link and it leads directly back. I made a mistake. This would be something like online bank user account equals 6066, and you change it from 6066 to 6065. Without authenticating, you go back and you look at somebody else's account. You're being evil at this point. Hey, something's wrong here. Why didn't you go through the authentication mechanism? Why didn't I set up an indirect object reference securely, fixing the authentication? So what we would do to protect against this is we would abstract that particular resource back there and force you through the authentication mechanism, not letting you know exactly what it was. Look in the lower left here. So the real file that you're getting to is report123.xls. I create a mapping to app file equals 1, and that's only good for that one session. And then the next time you would go to another ID, I would map that to a different ID or a different file on the inside. So I would continually update my map and not allow you direct access. Now, how do I see this from a forensic standpoint? I would see the request for that particular document going directly to it, and I would have that resource back there. Would that be on the file server here? Yes, you'd just have access to those files, but you'd be changing accounts, you'd be twisting around, going to direct links. So I don't see that you'd have a lot of data here from a forensics investigation standpoint. It would probably be in the back-end database of retrieval of files. So what we would do is we would map to that database or that particular file server back there, handing these back and saying, hey, that was over an unauthenticated credential connection. Cross-site request forgery is set up very close to cross-site scripting. I want you to look at the diagram here. So the attacker sets a trap. They copy the original information from the good website. So you and I are supposed to be talking to each other. I have the good website. They copy my website and they put it there. Instead of coming to me, what happens is the attacker sends you something that says, hey, go there. Now, if they just replicated the site, something would go wrong. You would see it very clearly. But if they put a wrapper around my site, making you come to them and saying, there's all of Dean's site information, there's his authentication dialog box, which is actually a connection to me, you're keying in that information there and it's being passed back to me and they're getting a copy of it, like credit card information. So what we would have to do is, from an attacker standpoint, we would have to convince you to go there instead of here. What would that look like on my site? What forensics data would be sitting here for me to investigate? Nothing. I would see that the attacker came and visited me. Maybe they sucked down my whole site. That might be a bunch of log entries here. But web crawlers happen all the time. So our sites continually get sucked down with all of their graphics there. So I don't know that that would be anything that would be a clue or an indicator, but that would be the result that would be in the files here that the forensics investigator would look at. Here's a big one. Security misconfiguration is a big deal in web servers. I use the default passwords. I use anything that you install on the site. I don't do good security. or I allow you to gain access from the original site back into the database, or you get to the development servers. If you were actually coming to me and presenting information and I wasn't secure in what I was doing, there really wouldn't be any evidence except for some sort of destruction or mayhem that you caused. If you just looked around and didn't take anything, then you would be browsing back in there and I wouldn't see any net effect here on my web server. But if you went in and did something destructive, like you reached back into the database and you pulled down credit card information, I would see on the I would see the web server connecting to the database server, and on the database server side there would be a log entry there of you downloading a lot of material. Wouldn't be on the web server here. If I had a development server behind this web server, again, the log would be there. It wouldn't necessarily be on this web server. So not a lot of attack information to reveal from a forensics investigator standpoint. What we do to protect against this is we harden it. We don't leave the default configurations. We upgrade and harden the operating system and the utilities. One place that I would consider looking at for configuring correctly on all of this, if you're giving advice to the organization on how to fix these problems, which is not normal for forensics investigators, but you probably have some sort of security role with them, I would tell them to look at cisecurity.org for hardening guidelines to know how to harden the operating system, the utilities, the applications, the agents, and then from there do good patching and change configuration.